Hello, everyone. My name is Monty Nima, and I'm a junior here in the state of Michigan at Novi High School. Welcome to our 2020 Tech Series, and thank you all so much for joining us today.
Hi, my name is Aaliyah Hirji, and I'm also a junior at Novi High School. We're so excited to be your moderators today on the panel.
Today we have Audrey Pe with us, a powerful advocate for women in STEM and the founder of WiTech, an international nonprofit. Audrey, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
No problem. So, hi everyone. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Audrey Pe. I'm the founder and executive director of WiTech, which is short for Women in Technology. We are a global youth-run nonprofit that aims to educate, inspire, and empower youth to break gender barriers and use tech to make a difference in society. So I founded WiTech when I was 15 years old, a sophomore in high school, and I am currently on a gap year, wrapping up my gap year as I'm set to start at Stanford University this fall. Overall, I'm born and raised here in Manila, Philippines, which is where WiTech is headquartered.
Wow, that's so cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about your organization? What is the focus of WiTech?
So WiTech primarily has two key problems that we're aiming to help solve. One being the gender gap in technology, and second being the lack of tech access that exists. So locally here in the Philippines, only 18% of our startups are founded by women, and only approximately half of our country is connected to the internet and has access to either a desktop or a laptop. So WiTech really began as a platform for me to interview and feature the stories of women in technology that I had networked with online via platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn. And then it slowly evolved into this organization that hosted the first Women in Tech conference for students and by students here in the Philippines. Because we saw events like, for example, the Grace Hopper conference happening in the United States. And a lot of the girls that I encountered at tech competitions, tech events, and we gathered and we sort of thought like, why don't we bring something like that here to the Philippines and organize it ourselves, because the adults, weren't organizing it or bringing it forward. After that, we started thinking about how to increase tech access past the cities and past the capital, Metro Manila, which is where I and most of our members live. And thus the Women in Tech Teach program was born, in which we brought tech modules and equipment to different public high school and elementary schools across the Philippines. And overall, we've taught over 100 kids how to code for the first time using Scratch. So those types of workshops, events, all culminate as well into this chapter expansion program, in which we bring and equip different WiTech chapters around the world with the resources that we've made and accumulated over time, in the hopes that our WiTech conferences, Women in Tech Teach programs can be replicated in these areas. And overall, we can just help close the gender gap in tech and make sure that everybody, regardless of what gender or like socioeconomic status they're in, like has access to technology and the potential to use it to make a difference in the world. So that's us at WiTech.
It's so cool to see everything that you're doing just as a 19-year-old. What are some other ways that WiTech engages young women who are aspiring to pursue a career in technology? Would you have any advice for them?
Ooh, so that's a really good question, because I like to think of the work we do at WiTech as, yes, inspiring the next generation of girls in STEM, but also teaching like any young person that we encounter that you don't have to follow, the stereotypes that society like puts on you. Like when you teach a girl or when you empower a girl to go into STEM, you're inspiring so many other young people to think past, the gender stereotypes of girls to go into humanities and guys and go into STEM, and really instilling this mindset that you can do absolutely anything, regardless of what the people around you are saying. And that's a message that I hope all the young people, regardless of your gender, like get from the work that we do at WiTech. And another thing that I hope they get is that you don't have to be a specific age or have been grown up, to start an organization or to start thinking about consciously what kind of impact you want to make in your community. It's all about thinking about what are the problems in the world around me, like what resources do I have and how can I translate those resources into action. And in my case, that really began with experiencing firsthand the lack of support in going into STEM, and then translating that into okay, how can I, as like a 15-year-old back then, Filipina, help contribute? And to me, that was through the internet. That was through writing blog posts. And I never dreamed that we'd come all this way into becoming like an official nonprofit, but here we are. And it all began with, taking that step forward. And I think anybody as well can do that.
Wow, that's just so nice to hear from you. Like, I think that all of your hard work and dedication is like, we can clearly see the passion that you have for STEM, and you have such a successful organization, and we truly appreciate all the work that you're doing to close the gender gap. And I think one of our questions is, how have you been able to build such an awesome network, both offline and online?
Ooh, so that's a really good one, because a lot of our projects in WiTech, how we turned from a blog into a community organization into a nonprofit, began because of networking. And I think a common misconception for, I think, a lot of teenagers is that LinkedIn, for instance, is a platform that's just for college students or professionals, when in fact, I know that my experience, LinkedIn has been such a big asset in community building and networking online. So that's my biggest, I think, platform for online networking. And at the beginning, even when WeTech was still starting out as a blog, like I would cold message these women in tech that I had found via the hashtag women in tech on LinkedIn. And I'd introduce myself and I'd say like, hi, my name's Audrey. I'm 15 and I'm looking for role models in STEM because I don't have any in my community. Would you be willing to answer these questions or like schedule a call to chat? And just those messages, like not everybody would reply to them, but when they did, they'd create like this kind of informal mentorship, which I think is so underrated. And all you need to do to be able to get that type of mentorship is be proactive, be the one to reach out, do your research, and just not be afraid, I think, of messing up. Because I think when I was reaching out to like these big women in tech, in the field, I was really nervous because I didn't, know what I was doing in terms of how I was managing VTech. And by nature, I'm really introverted. So it was very difficult at the beginning. But over some time, like I was able to pick up, different skills, and that trickled into like my in-person networking and really pushing myself to attend these networking conferences and events. And that's how I actually secured my first speaking engagement, by attending this tech conference here in Manila. And funny story about that was that when I walked into the conference hall, I wanted to walk straight out because I was so scared. None of the Basically, when I looked around me, there were barely any women, and I saw no other teenagers. And I'm so glad I stayed at that conference, because I told myself that if I left, I would regret the opportunities that, I could have missed. And I'm so glad I stayed, because I was then able to watch a panel and participate in a Q&A where I elevator pitched WeTech and asked the question about the gender gap. And afterwards, I had representatives from the body organizing the ASEAN, so Association of Southeast Asian Nations, entrepreneurship conference here to be hosted in Manila. And that was how I secured my first speaking engagement to over 4,000 people back in 2017. So crazy things like that happen when you put yourself out there and just be really proactive about networking, whether it be online or offline.
That's so inspiring and like important to hear. I think it's great, like all the things that you've done, like just as a 15-year-old. That's so cool. So since you've spoke at so many public events, do you have any advice for students about public speaking?
Definitely. So public speaking to me is all about storytelling. And I don't think it should be a question of like, oh, how do I not mess up, or like how do I deliver the perfect speech? Because I think a lot of us, like, you put this unconscious pressure on ourselves to like practice like perfect delivery and perfect execution. When in fact, I think it's okay to mess up, it's okay to stumble, as long as you keep in mind like what central message do you want to impart to your audience. And when I give talks, whether it's the crowds as big as like 4,000 or as small as 5 people, I think I always keep in mind like what kind of message do I want to leave behind. Because at the end of the day, people aren't going to remember word per word what you're going to say, but they're going to remember how you made them feel, whether it was inspired, uplifted, or whether you made them laugh. And something that I try to keep central to all the talks I give are themes like Gen Z empowerment, like making space, for young people, like empowering the next generation, not underestimating us, believing in the power of young women in STEM, starting a nonprofit, not being afraid to start something no matter how old you are. And these types of things I feel carry into, in the stories. And that's another thing that I really encourage young people to practice when they're doing public speaking. Like, instead of like really like rattling off facts and impact, well, it's okay to talk about that in terms of your work. It's more important, I think, to talk about how you've grown and like how those experiences have made you who you are today. And stories, I think, are the best way to really showcase that.
That's so cool and helpful to hear about. I know public speaking can be like scary and intimidating for a lot of students. Is there any other advice that you would like to give any students?
Ooh, I think for students that are contemplating starting their own projects but are kind of afraid to make the jump, I totally sympathize in that. I think a huge part of what almost stopped me from studying WiTech back in 2016 was just this fear of not knowing what I was doing, because I didn't know of anyone that was doing something similar. Like, I didn't know anyone who had a nonprofit and was in high school. I didn't know anybody that, led a nonprofit. Like, I didn't really know the nitty-gritty, like, ins and outs of organizational management. So I thought, like, who am I to, dive into this, like, as a 15-year-old? But it really boiled down to focusing on the problem that I wanted to help solve and thinking, like, if I don't do something about this problem in my community, I'm going to regret like the inaction. And when I held on to that idea, and when I held on to thinking of all like the young people that we could impact at WiTech, that's what really made me launch. And that's something that I really want to challenge other young people to think about. Like, it's one thing to share Instagram stories and posts on Facebook about advocacies, and it's really another thing to take that inspiration and translate it into action. And I hope that more young people start really thinking of how to do that. And before people watching this may think like, oh, but like, how am I supposed to do that? I don't have any connections. Like, it's so easy to make them, especially when you have access to the internet, which is honestly such a privilege. Like, being able to open a LinkedIn account, set up like informal chats or coffee chats virtually, like that in itself can be such a big learning experience. And WiTech just started as a blog, like way before we began as a community organization. So it's little steps like that. And it's really taking advantage of the big like asset that is internet connection.
Wow, your words have just really touched me, and I think it's just so inspiring to see how you've come from a background where you might have not had all the resources readily available to you. And it just really goes to show what self-confidence and believing in yourself and really putting yourself out there means. And I just want to say that we're so, so grateful to have you here on our panel. And I'm sure that all the students listening right now are just really inspired by all the work you've done and the passion that you really show towards your organization and STEM in general.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Like, I always love doing chats like these, and really hope that if anyone has any more questions, you feel free to like contact me about anything at all, whether it be managing academics and nonprofit work, how to launch a nonprofit, how to get involved in WiTech. I'm there for you guys, so don't hesitate to contact me.
Thank you for providing us with such phenomenal insight and advice, and thank you all for joining us.